How would you feel if people arrested for domestic violence had to register like sex offenders do? I think this is one of those things that sounds great when you only have a vague concept of it, but is actually a pretty terrible idea when you have a better idea of what specifically it means. I have an acquaintance that's a registered pedophile. That's what comes up every time a prospective employee does a background check, when they go to the hospital, and after a point the nurses are suddenly way more rude, wonder what they found out, every time they move and have to basically block out blocks and blocks around any school or public service. Their infant was almost removed from their custody at birth. And this is in Canada. When we were 16 they sent a tit pic to their also 16-year-old boyfriend. Charged with production, holding, and distribution of child pornography, and now they're a registered pedophile. It's ruined their life, but they even admit it's easier on them being female, people are more confused and willing to hear them out. They've said had they been born male and this happened they probably would have killed themselves. Edit, they're working to get their record cleared, or it may have been before their child was born, but we're not super close and I know it's a really tender subject so I try not to pry. It sounds ridiculous to say you feel sorry for a pedophile, but I think it just goes to show how buzzwords are used to manipulate public opinion. I'm doubtful of your friend's story. Not too far-fetched however. A friend of mine who is now deceased had a BS reason for getting hit a sex offender charge as well. He was 18, girl was 16. The girl was babysitting someone else's kid, 7. Kid went to sleep and friend came over and was just kissing the girl. The neighbor told the homeowner. Friend is black, girl is white, the homeowner white. Homeowner was absolutely pissed a black guy was in his house. Homeowner pressed charges and groomed the 7-year-old to lie about what happened. Even though the kid was asleep, friend was charged and spent 2 years in jail as well as on the registry. It absolutely ruined his life. He had his ups and downs after his jail stint. 2 DUIs. 2 car crashes. After these incidents he actually started doing pretty well. He enrolled in college. As he got closer to graduation he started applying for jobs. After realizing that his job prospects were dismal due to the record, he killed himself. Similar experience here. I was charged with aggravated domestic for allegedly beat my brother so bad he was hospitalized for 3 days. Sounds pretty awful, right? He came to my home with a pistol and his girlfriend while my wife was there alone. The GF came to record our interaction. He wanted me to attack him. He called me at work threatening me and my wife. I left work and spent 45 minutes begging, pleading, trying to reason with him that we were brothers and the silliness he was upset about would all be a distant memory one day and that it wasn't worth tearing 2 brothers apart. I have no recollection of the events that followed. But I was arrested. Months later in court, we looked so stupid, 2 grown men of close age and stature, one asking for an order of protection. In hindsight I should have called the cops on him. But at the time I thought I could reason and keep the law out of a family matter. Oh well. This is going to be an unpopular opinion. But I am not a fan of offender lists. Especially beyond the sentence of the person who was convicted of a crime. Hear me out before you get your pitchforks. If someone is convicted of a crime and is sentenced to 5 years in prison, then that is already public record and will remain public record, assuming no expunction, for the duration of their sentence. If they are let out on parole after serving 2 and have parole for another 3, then I am more okay with the idea of an offender list. After all, you should be on your best behavior on parole. But I can't get on board with, after serving your sentence, to still be on some list. If you are a danger to society to the point that you have to register on a list for the rest of your life, then you don't need to be on the streets. If you are safe enough to be released from jail/prison and have finished your sentence, then that should be it. Honestly, I am almost a fan of only having your criminal record available in very limited circumstances, not to the public or to employers, once your sentence is complete. Edit, Beat behavior to best behavior. Sorry, autocorrect at 2 a.m. It took me 13 years to understand I was in an abusive relationship the first time. As you say, it is subtle and complex, and we are not told from an early age about psychological and emotional abuse and the hot/cold, intermittent reinforcement cycle of abuse. People only ever talk about and therefore recognize physical abuse. But not all abusive relationships contain a physical element, or at least not much of one. I just put my constant distress down to it being a turbulent relationship, and that this is normal to varying extents in all relationships, and that if only I could just try harder and pay more attention to his needs and train and change myself to be an even, more spacious, giving, patient, and tolerant person, essentially by suppressing and abandoning myself completely, then everything would calm down and the relationship would work. I didn't understand that nothing I could say or do would ever make it work because he was abusive and needed to have absolute control and always be engaged in a battle or drama because that is how he got his energy. In my second relationship, it took me 2 years to start to realize it was abusive and then another 18 months to get out. And abusers deliberately separate their victims from friends/family. This means they have no voice of reason to say that what is happening is not okay, not acceptable, and that there is help available and offer them assistance. They've often destroyed their financial independence, sometimes by getting them fired due to harassment at the workplace, or convincing them to resign, or moving them away from their previous workplace. They've got no friends, far away from anyone they knew, no money, and have had their confidence in themselves destroyed, along with being fearful of repercussions. Abusers threaten to kill the victim, the child if there is any, the pets. And when a victim attempts to leave, this is the most dangerous time because the threats of death or serious injury are genuine, as the abuse tends to escalate at that point. People need to be educated on red flags and warning signs and not get into relationships with people that exhibit those flags, or leave relationships early before the clutches are fully dug in. That's why I hate when people rag on relationships advice for telling people to break up. That's hardly bad advice to see signs of disrespect and leave before they start getting into your head properly. I totally disagree with it. As a defense attorney, I've seen a lot of the registration system. It is already so flawed. There are so many people on it that absolutely should not have to register. Fun fact: you do not have to be convicted of a registrable offense to be required to register, at least in my state, which is a fairly liberal state. If you are charged with a crime that requires registration, and are found guilty of anything coming from that set of circumstances, you register. Even if found not guilty by a jury for that offense. And it is much easier than you would think to be charged with a registrable offense than you would think. The predatory offender lists are very watered down with non-predators. Once you register, it's incredibly difficult to turn your life around. No one will hire you, you can't go to college, and registration is complex, especially for poor, uneducated people. That violation incredibly likely, even if you're not actively avoiding registration. Americans really like cultivating criminals and leaving societal problems to fester instead of proactively working to fix them. And mental health is at the head of this. A list like this is a key example of something that sounds great on paper, but would be absolutely horrible in practice. I want abusers gone too, I grew up with them, but a list is not the answer. The answer is attack the root of the problem: generational abuse and mental health problems. Said abuser I was with had issues with some stuff. Not all with issues are abusers, but most abusers have issues. But, the fix for that step in the chain, better mental health resources so abusers aren't made, is to spend a lot more money in taxes for better resources. And Americans don't want this. And that's where the bread meets the butter. Americans like leaving problems to fester because it's cheaper to do this as a country, and why care when money is power? American here, and yes, our system brands you for life. We don't rehabilitate, we punish, and after we punish, we ostracize, register, So once a person has done the time in prison, they aren't able to find housing or a job, so they do what they can to survive, which means they can only find minimum wage jobs, live in places where there is high crime b/c, it's all they can afford, etc., which makes it easier to find trouble again and return to prison. Also, another sad fact, some of our prisons are owned by private corporations which make a shit ton of money, so why rehab people when they can come back and make them more money? We're America, the land of opportunity. But pathetically, we are not the land of second chances. Oh, and the land of the most incarcerated individuals. What prize do we get? And because of vast socio-economic divide in our country, those who don't have money or any type of family situation that will support someone once they get out of prison to slowly regain a foothold back in normal society, they are absolutely screwed. It's sad, and I'm not sure it will change in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. Every housing or job application I've ever encountered always has a "have you ever been convicted of a crime" question, and if you answer, you're pretty guaranteed to not get that job, house, or APT. Completely agree. It's a shame that lots of people feel that people can't reform and that all criminals are pure evil and irredeemable. The internet thinks with its hate boner too much and is too preoccupied with its warped form of justice. It's clear that harsh penalties do little to actually deter crime. These registries extend the punishment far past what can be considered reasonable for anyone who could be considered to have served their time, and if they truly are a danger to society, they shouldn't be out of prison. It makes it infinitely harder to get back on their feet and become a functioning member of society who won't commit any more crimes, especially when the exact same information is on their criminal record, which is checked by employers and other bodies anyway. May they need continuous support and monitoring by the state? Perhaps, but that's something that should only concern them and their parole. I have no idea why people think ostracizing someone from society, preventing them from getting jobs or even forming meaningful relationships by putting them on a register and forcing them to tell their neighbors is a good idea and totally won't lead to reoffending. If you tell someone get your shit together, but we won't fully let you back into society even if you do, then what is the point of them even trying to reform? The system is definitely very flawed. My husband's friend got convicted of statutory rape as a teenager for having sex with his girlfriend. The parents convinced the judge he was this violent monster, and he got slapped with some of the harshest rules I've ever seen in these cases. He was ordered to register as a sex offender and isn't allowed to have any social media accounts. He can't go to malls or movie theaters or any public place unless it's a necessity, like grocery stores, and the judge ordered that anywhere he moves he must speak with all households and personally tell them he's a sex offender. His girlfriend has been made to give testimony to his parole officer and the court that he isn't forcing her into a relationship and isn't raping her. He's in his 30s now. I feel super bad for him because he's a really good guy the system fucked over. Edit: I know no one will see this, but my husband corrected some of the information on this that I feel I should correct. The incident of his friend was when they were teens, but he wasn't arrested and charged for it until later, within the statute of limitations. The girl had been going to therapy, and in the session the story came out and her therapist spoke to her parents stating that the sexual encounter was deeply traumatizing to her. Parents pushed to file charges and the girl did. My husband's friend is an Eagle Scout and relevant, as it made him confess anything and everything to police. He thought he was doing the right thing by admitting that yes, they had sex as teens, and felt deeply upset he hurt her. He agreed to be punished. Little did he know the judge was going to put those kinds of restrictions on him. He never once broke the law before or after the incident, so it was quite shocking. He's adhered to his parole and only had one issue with going back to jail for a few days due to a mix-up. It's honestly something one user mentioned that I wanted to highlight, and it's the gray area of statutory rape. Is it a law that's needed? Yes. But with cases like his, there needs to be a different way of handling it, and the judges that restrict his freedoms like this. He has some of the harshest rules I've ever seen. Yes. I wish this was understood more. There are people out there that are genuinely bad people, beyond hope of ever integrating back into society. But they are the exceptions, even among those that have committed serious crimes, not the rule. I've been in the system. I was arrested for domestic violence a bit over 10 years ago now. I was barely 18, and in a toxic, abusive relationship. One day, she took it too far and I hit back. I should never have done so and I regret it. I wound up convicted for misdemeanor domestic assault. I spent the next 3 years of my life in and out of jail, never for actually doing anything new, but for various fun reasons. You see, my probation was run through a for-profit government contractor which was later shut down and fined for screwing people out of money and then violating their probation if they didn't pay. I met some real bad dudes in there, guys that would mess you up for talking to them the wrong way. But most of them were normal fucking people that had lives waiting for them to return to. A lot of them were in for drugs. Some people had screwed up early on and wound up perpetual criminals because they screwed themselves out of any chance at a normal life. No one tried to help any of us. Sure, there were court-mandated classes where a well-meaning counselor would come in and go through anger management or the like. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But after finishing their sentence, these people would get thrown out with no money, no job, no prospects, and no skills. With black marks on their record in desperate job markets. Which, I promise you, is one of the hardest obstacles to overcome in life. I was convicted of domestic violence, even misdemeanor domestic violence, and no one wanted to hire me. I couldn't get a job at a fucking call center, hundreds of miles away from customers. I found out the state had a published list for different jobs of what crimes would disqualify you, so I wound up taking care of disabled adults in their homes. Logic that. I wound up going to school and getting my degree. Luckily it wasn't a felony, so financial aid didn't hold it against me. Otherwise, there goes another of capitalist America's few outs from poverty. I got married, I have kids. For years, this would hound me. Every time we would move, we had to look for months because we would get turned down again and again because of my background. A job loss was panic mode because I would go through months where companies would be all on board to hire me, a manager would even reassure me that yeah we get it, we all make mistakes, etc., and then the background check would come back and I wouldn't get the job. Not only did I pay for years in and out of jail, my family suffered for 7 years afterwards. It's been 10 years now, and I've had no issues with the law. I have a successful career and I love my family. Don't put me on some fucking list. Don't put my family back through that. For people who want to get all self-righteous about being tough on crime, how many millions of children grew up without one of their parents because of the immoral drug war? How many children didn't get sufficient nutrition, or time spent with, or really much any positive interaction because one parent's in jail and the other's working 2 jobs? Also you can have your warm and fuzzies. You disgust me. Against. You've done your time, why should you be on a list that is going to further stymie your life? If you are so dangerous that you need to be on a list and prevented from owning a firearm, not being allowed to live near a park or a school, not being allowed to have certain jobs, then why are you not still in prison? You do your crime, you get out of prison and that should be the end of it. No lists, no felony status, none of it. If there is a real fear that you are going to reoffend, then you shouldn't be released from prison. What your past crime was should only matter when it comes to sentencing you if you have reoffended. My sister was beaten badly by her husband after he did some hard drugs and was already drunk. He served his time, but he's a felon. So he's not going to get much better than a job washing dishes. He's also a high school dropout and my sister allowed him to not work for the bulk of their marriage, at minimum wage. How the hell is he supposed to stand on his own 2 feet when he's got that felony status? He has to pay his PO every time he see him, and is required to meet with him once a month, pay for his own drug testing, pay for his own alcohol testing, pay restitution for his crime, pay child support for 2 children, though one is now 19, so I guess it's one child now, and then pay for things like rent, food, utilities, and such. Creating a domestic violence registry doesn't do any good in this case but to further keep him down. So where does someone like my sister's husband go? In our current system, his only option is going to reoffend and go back to prison. Prison sucks, but at least there he will have a job to do, he will have a roof over his head, 3 meals. The system is designed to get people like him to fail.